Well, the MLS transfer window has slammed shut once again, as it is just been official 10 minutes ago that the transfer window has officially closed in MLS, and indeed, I was right before where I said it seems like the transfer window is going to be shut at 11:59 p.m. Central Time and 9:59 p.m. my time, which is Pacific Standard Time, and indeed that, of course, is the case. Now, in terms of today's deadline day, judging by the fact that there is a wall of text here on this board, you know that it's been a busy transfer deadline day around MLS, and there's definitely not only some signings that happen within the league, and we also have a big blockbuster trade that we're about to talk about, but we also have some outgoing transfer, and you know how MLS is going through kind of a movement where a lot of these young players are now making the jump to Europe, and their club is able to get a huge sum of cash. Well, we saw a couple of teams that were able to do that, and they definitely got a huge sum of cash by selling off one of their most talented youngster that they developed from the academy and transfer them to Europe. And it's obviously so great to see that of course is the case, because that's what MLS is all about, and at least that's what MLS is aiming for now, that we are in an era where a lot of these MLS teams are developing young talent and they're able to sell them off to Europe for a huge sum of money. But before we talk about some of those players that were able to go to Europe for a big money move, let's talk about the biggest deadline day deal within the league, which is Jeremy Ebobisse, traded to the San Jose Earthquakes for up to $1.167 million general allocation money to the Portland Timbers. Now, this was a rumor that was happening yesterday, where I heard there was a rumor that Jeremy Ebobisse was going to go to the Quakes. And I basically laugh at that rumor, because there's no way in the world the Quakes are going to do that, because I know that this is a team that for the past couple of years, they are not known in terms of spending big amount of money on players within the league. And, in some way, that's kind of what frustrates me about the Quakes. It's that, this is kind of the recipe that sometimes they could do, which is just, instead of maybe going to Europe or going down to South America to kind of find these random players down in the second division of Brazil, how about just search within the league? I mean, there's talent within the league. Why they don't just go there to find some proven MLS player to get them to insert into this team? And, again, that's kind of the thing that I want them to do. And this move definitely finally gives me what I really want the Quakes to do, is get a guy that is a proven MLS player that is able to be very serviceable with the team. And there's no doubt that Jeremy Ebobisse is a guy that the Quakes desperately kind of needed, and at least I think that's one of the things that they desperately needed. I mean, this team still have a lot of things that they desperately needed, but that number 9 position was one of the area that they desperately needed, because there's really no true number 9 for this Quakes team. I mean, Wando obviously in his final year isn't really providing the goals as we've seen in the past. K-Cow is still only a 17-year-old, and he's kind of the only one that is providing the goal in that number 9 spot. And even then, I don't want to just kind of pressure him to be the main goal scorer of the team. And then, of course, you got Andy Rios, which I don't really need to explain any more about how he's been as effective as pretty much putting a defender as in the number 9 position. So the fact that Jeremy Ebobisse is now going to be with the Quakes, and he is definitely going to be playing in that true number 9 position, I feel like this is something that the Quakes desperately need. Now, if there's one thing that I do still maybe have some concern with this move, is the fact that, are we going to provide the service to Jeremy Ebobisse? Because, one thing that Ebobisse did very well with the Portland Timbers is that he had some world-class player around him that would provide service. So guys like Diego Valeri and Sebastian Blanco always provide service to Ebobisse, and Ebobisse, we know he is a guy that is a clinical goal finisher, especially in that number 9 position. And going from that to a Quakes team that, they still do have a couple of guys that could be able to provide service. I mean, Espinoza is one that can come fresh off of my mind. K-Cow occasionally can actually show off those flashy passes and be kind of the playmaker. And then Chofis, despite the fact that I know this season hasn't really lived up to the signings that he got this offseason, he at least at times maybe provides the service, but they're definitely no Diego Valeri or Sebastian Blanco in terms of the class service that they give to their strikers. So that's kind of the area that I'm a little bit concerned with this, but at the end of the day, this is clearly a signing that the Quakes desperately needed, especially with the way that, Wando is retiring this year, and there's always that question of who exactly is going to be heir of Wando, which I know a lot of people have said it's going to be K-Cal, but even then, K-Cal is only going to be 18 years old next year, and I'm definitely not going to put too much pressure on him to just be kind of the Wando replacement. So it's great to see that Ebowasi is going to kind of be that guy that, I don't know if he's going to be as good as the prime Wando that we know, but at least if he is going to get service, he is going to be a guy that can score 10 to 15 goals. Now, in terms of the Timbers perspective, I mean, I know a lot of Timbers fans are very surprised about this deal and the fact that they decided to trade Ebowasi to another team, but in some way, I think you kind of saw this one coming, knowing the fact that Ebowasi wasn't able to play in his favorite number 9 position, and in some way, the Timbers have been putting Ebowasi more on the wing area, and he's clearly not a winger. Like, it's been shown this season when he played on the wing, he's really ineffective, and knowing the fact that they already have Felipe Mora as that effective number 9, and eventually they're going to get Niskota back into that starting 11, yeah, there's just no place for Ebowasi to kind of play in that number 9 position. In other words, that he's really dropped the pecking order in terms of the depth chart at there. So, yeah, they kind of have no option, but, just kind of have to move on from them. I was thinking maybe they can move on from him from selling him to Europe and basically cash in on that, but instead that's not what they decided to do, and they decided to just kind of trade him to another team. But the good news is at least they got a huge sum of money in terms of that general allocation money, like $1.167 million. That's one of the most money that I've seen a team been able to spend on to sign a player within the league. And again, it is shocking the fact that the Quakes are one of those teams, because the Quakes have notoriously been a team that have never been using their general allocation money and never even look within the league to see these kind of these proven MLS talent that is kind of up for grabs, and they just kind of ignored them. So it's really a breath of fresh air to finally see this team able to do so. Now, moving on in terms of the other long list of news, and I promise I won't go that deep into some of the rest of these news, but moving on to the next news is that SKC has officially sold Gianluca Busio to Venezia for a club record fee of $6 million. I have heard reports that this could be up to $11 million if it includes all the bonus. But yeah, this is kind of the biggest secret that everybody kind of knew it was going to happen, where there was a lot of rumor that Busio was going to be going to Venezia, and now it is official. The fact that SKC basically did something that they've been want to do for a very long time, and it's something that pretty much every MLS team want to do for a very long time, and that is sold off one of their most talented player that they developed all the way back in their academy level, and able to sell them off to Europe for a big sum of money. And yeah, it's great to see that Busio is going to be going to Europe, and I think I'm definitely excited for him to get his first kind of couple of appearance in Europe, and with Valencia, a team that he just got promoted in Syria, and I also mentioned before that Tanner Testament also is going to be going to Valencia, and something tells me I'm definitely going to see some Valencia match this season. Keeping an eye on a couple of MLS players and see how they're going to do with that club. Now, moving on in terms of the next signings, and also these signings and transfer is in no particular order of what time it was done, but the next one is also another big one that is very close to actually be happening, and that of course is Club Brugge closing in to sign Tajon Buchanan from New England for up to $6 million, and I'm assuming this deal is going to be finalized very soon. But once it's finalized, then yeah, there's another big name kind of player, one of the most promising player in MLS that is developed within a team's academy, and they're now going to be sold off for a big sum of money, and New England is going to get a big golden parachute because of that. And again, it's very great to see that some of these teams are doing so, and it just kind of gets to a point where 5 years ago this was not a possibility. Like 5 years ago, I don't think we've seen teams were able to sell off one of their best known player in the academy level to go to Europe for that sum of money. But here we are in 2021, and it's going to continue. I mean, if you think $6 million right now seems a lot, wait till maybe 5 or 10 years down the line when I think the rest of Europe or even in South America sees that MLS could be a league where they could get some of these hidden gem players for a cheap amount of money. Don't be surprised at that. Of course, it is going to be the case, and we also know that transfer fee. We know that every single year transfer fee has just continues to go higher and higher each year. So $6 million, I think maybe 10 years down the line could maybe be $60 million with the way that the transfer market has been just so inflated in the past couple of years. Now, another well-known player that was developed from within the academy of an MLS team, but also are going to be going to Europe, is Sam Vines. Now, I kind of mentioned this already, so I'm not going to go too deep into this, is that the Rapids have sold Sam Vines to Royal Antwerp for $2 million. I kind of mentioned that in my last news of the weeks, and it seems like this is just kind of a confirmation that it did happen, and Sam Vines will be joining Tejan Buchanan and Gianluca Busio and all these other their big name kind of young MLS player that is now making the jump to Europe, and see how they're going to develop and how their career is going to look like down the year. Now, the Chicago Fire, they actually decided to also sell off one of their biggest asset, although this is not a player that they actually developed, but they decided to sell off Przemysław Frankowski to RC Lens for $3 million. Now, out of all of these moves, I think this one kind of came out of left field a little bit, because I didn't think the Chicago Fire was going to sell off Przemysław Frankowski, and I didn't think Frankowski had a particularly good year this season, but I guess maybe he had a relatively good Euros, and maybe some European team kind of saw that he had a great Euros with Poland, and they decided to kind of take some chances. And for the Chicago Fire, with the way that they are able to get some offer from some European team to get Przemysław Frankowski, and knowing that he hasn't been playing that well this season, I mean, they kind of just say yes, take it. I mean, he hasn't been as effective as we expected this season, and now we still would get some money out of him, and in this case, it's going to be the $3 million that they're going to receive from Frankowski after they sell him to RC Lens. Now, the Seattle Sounders have signed 21-year-old, and I actually put signed twice there, but they have signed this Brazilian 21-year-old attacker called Leo Chu. I think that's how you say it. There's actually a accent in terms of the E and the U, so I'm not quite sure if you actually kind of pronounce that like that with the accent. But nevertheless, they have signed this kid from Grêmio, which is a club that is very well known in Brazil, and you could definitely argue it alongside with Palmeiras as the two powerhouse of Brazilian soccer. But for the Sounders, it's pretty clear that they desperately need some attacking depth, with the way that a lot of their attack has been either injured or currently on international duty. And also, knowing the fact that a couple of weeks ago when they played against Austin, of how depleted that they were, that they literally had to rely on teenage players. And while those teenage players did very well with the team, they definitely need some reinforcement, and I'm assuming this is a guy that is definitely going to be coming in as that reinforcement, and kind of in that spot where, in case if the Sounders are going to go through that injury crisis again and going through players that is missing because of international duty, then they can of course rely him there, instead of just kind of had to choose the nuke button, which is bringing a couple of guys from Tacoma Defiance and basically put them in there to get some starting minutes. Now, the Sounders also have acquired Nicholas Benezet from the Colorado Rapids in exchange for $50,000 general allocation money. And again, this is simply a move that they definitely want to make to reinforce some of the depth that they have on the attack. And in case if they do go through that situation, Benezet could be a good option too. I mean, I'm kind of surprised the Rapids haven't been using him as much ever since they signed him from Toronto, but he is still a very good utility player, and for $50,000 general allocation money, I think they definitely got a bargain for Nicholas Benezet from the Colorado Rapids. Now, the LA Galaxy have signed Dejan Jovic, I think that's how you say it, from Eintracht Frankfurt. Now, he is a relatively young striker that the Galaxy decided to sign, and this is clearly a signing for them to potentially, hopefully get a guy that could maybe take a little bit low off of Chicharito. Obviously, Kevin Cabral was supposed to be that guy that maybe is taking that low off Chicharito, but knowing the fact that, as I mentioned before, with Kevin Cabral, pretty much one of the most cursed striker right now in the league, and it's just not allowed to score a goal no matter what he does. Yeah, it was pretty clear that the Galaxy desperately need to look for an other option. And in some way, if Kevin Cabral actually saw this video and saw that they, of course, signed a striker, yeah, he must be very nervous because he knows his time with the Galaxy could potentially be up. And that, again, if Cabral continue to struggle in these next couple of games, I won't be surprised if Dejan Jovic will come in for the Galaxy. And that's also assuming Chicharito is not going to be back in that number 9 position, because he's still dealing with that injury he suffered last month. Now, FC Cincinnati have acquired Florian Valot from the New York Red Bulls in exchange for up to $100,000 general allocation money. So, for Cincinnati, they want to boost up their midfield a little bit, and they kind of gone with the cheap but also safe option. I think Valot is definitely a decent player. I mean, I know he hasn't been as good as he was ever since he suffered from that ACL injury, but it's always going to be tough for players that gone through a torn ACL injury and have to come back from that and expect to be the same as before when they suffer a torn ACL injury. But nevertheless, he's still a very decent player, and for the price that Cincinnati paid to the Red Bulls, I mean, that's a pretty good offer and a pretty good option for him. And we'll see whether or not if they're going to maybe slot him into that midfield position, or they're just going to use him as more of a depth player. Now, the Vancouver Whitecaps have signed Ecuadorian youth international Pedro Vette, and he is a guy that, from what I heard, is an attacking midfield. And by the way, for Vancouver, coming into the summer transfer window, I kind of talked about this when the season was about to begin, but there is always that question of who exactly is going to be that number 10 for this Whitecaps team that is going to kind of take that role and just kind of fit the final missing piece of puzzle for this Whitecaps team. Because when you look at this team, they're pretty good in most of the position except for that number 9 position, and unfortunately or not number 9, but that number 10 position. And unfortunately, the number 10 position, especially in MLS, is the most important position in your team. And this is a guy that I think they might feel like he is going to be that number 10 that they desperately want to get. Now, I don't know much about him other than the fact that I've heard some people said that he is a relatively promising player, but there's no doubt that with how young this Whitecaps team is, and at least for some of these youngsters on this Whitecaps team that have find some success with this team, guys like Christian DeHome really have developed to be a decent player for this Whitecaps team. And also I'm hoping he is going to be all right. There's no news of his injuries that he suffered after taking that penalty, or shall I say controversial penalty, against Minnesota United. But there is definitely some signs that some of these Whitecaps youngster has done very, very well with the team when they're getting regular minutes. And let's see whether or not if Pedro Vette is going to be one of those players that's going to slot into that role and is going to do decently with this Whitecaps team. Now, the Colorado Rapids, who, as I mentioned earlier, they of course traded Nicholas Benezet to the Seattle Sounders. Well, they are actually, or the other thing that I mentioned with the Rapids selling Sam Vines to Royal Antwerp, well, their answer in terms of replacing him apparently is going to sign a Brazilian left back called Lucas Esteves. I think that's how you say it, on loan from Palmeiras. Now, again, I'm not quite sure exactly if this is a direct replacement for Sam Vines, but one thing I know that this signing will definitely do is to finally have a left back on this team, which is, the left back position for this Rapids team is one of the Achilles heel of this team. I mean, throughout the season, they really truly have nobody that can play in that that left back position, and at times, they had to kind of put guys that aren't actually natural left back players, guys like Kellen Acosta and Austin Trusty in that left back row, and sometimes Robin Fraser even gone free at the back and don't even have a left back more, and they pretty much have more like left wing back into that position. So yeah, knowing this transfer window, they desperately need to add a player that can play in that position. It's unsurprised that they decided to sign a left back, and we'll just see whether or not if he is going to do well. I mean, he is a guy that comes from a team that is known as one of the powerhouse of Brazil, and we'll see whether or not when he does come into this team, and depending on if the Rapids are going to actually play in a formation that it requires you to kind of play a left back, whether or not if he's going to be slotted right into that spot, and we will not see the Rapids have that issue where they're playing players out of the position in that left back row simply because they just don't have a natural left back in their roster. Now, Sporting KC is close to sign Italian midfielder Jose Mari from Talles in Argentina. Now, I'm assuming this is maybe their solution in terms of replacing Gianluca Busio, and I'm not quite sure if exactly is it going to be a good option, because I haven't really heard a lot about this guy. I mean, I have heard that he has played with some big clubs in the past, like AC Milan in Serie A, and he also have been playing with Empoli in Serie A before. But now that he is going to be a guy, now that he is playing in Argentina, and I'm assuming maybe it didn't kind of work out for him in Europe, and now he's going to be coming to MLS. We'll see whether or not if that's going to work out for him. I mean, we've seen before where players might not work out in Europe, and when they come to MLS, they immediately blossom. So we'll see whether or not if this is going to be the case for Jose Mari. And also, no pressure in terms of trying to replace Gianluca Busio in that spot. Now, the Houston Dynamo acquire a midfielder, and I am going to absolutely butcher this name, but I believe it's Adalberto Carrasquilli from the Segunda Division in Spain. And again, I really don't know much about this guy. And in some way, it's kind of almost like a very Houston Dynamo signing where they decided to maybe get a guy from the second division of a random league. Well, in this case, the Segunda Division in Spain is a relatively more known league, but getting him, I guess maybe is to add some more depth in terms of the midfield for the Dynamo. Like, I don't think midfield is an issue for the Dynamo this season. I think the big issue for this team is still going for on the attack, and especially maybe going through the number 10 position where they still don't really have a creativity. And I haven't heard whether or not if he is going to be that guy that can play into that role and be kind of more versatile out there, but we shall see whether or not if this signing, of course, would work out for the Houston Dynamo. But now moving on into the last couple of signings is that Atlanta United, well, actually this is not a signing, but more of a report that they have completed an agreement to sign Luis Aroja from Leo, and that there's also a report that they will not sign Thiago Amanda this summer transfer window, and they're probably going to wait until the winter transfer window to complete this signing. Now, I think one of the reasons why they decided to not go with Thiago Amanda this summer transfer window is because they don't have a designated player spot open. I mean, they filled up all three of their DP, which also kind of makes me wonder how in the world are they able to get Luis Aroja and able to put him not in a DP contract, because the amount that Atlanta is looking to try to pay Leo to get Luis Araujo is going to be around $10 to $12 million, and that seems like a very hefty kind of fee for them to, of course, pay him. Now, that being said, he actually did relatively well during his time with Leo. In fact, he was actually fighting for the number 9 spot alongside with Jonathan David to see who is going to be the guy that is going to be a starter for that club. So, if you're, of course, fighting against a spot with Jonathan David, who we know that he has been incredible with Leo ever since he joined that team, then or not Jonathan David, I'm sorry, but Tim Way in terms of that spot. Jonathan David, of course, is the main main striker for that Leo team. But yeah, I'm assuming he is definitely going to be a decent player, and that I'm pretty sure for Atlanta, knowing the fact that they desperately need a number 9 and a guy that can maybe put a little bit of that hefty load off of Joseph Martinez, because it just feels like with this Atlanta team, without Joseph Martinez, they are basically doomed. Like, without him, at least for this season, it felt like it almost was similar to what happened in 2020. And also, let's just kind of say, without the prime Joseph Martinez and a guy that is that lethal goal scorer that we've seen for the past couple of years, it's unsurprised to see why this year Atlanta has not only struggled to score or struggled to defend, but also struggled to score goals throughout this season. So, yeah, again, if they do reach an agreement to the signing, it'll be interesting to see whether or not if he is going to provide that spark for this Atlanta team that they desperately needed in that attack that is not named Joseph Martinez. But that also being said, it'll be very interesting to see how they're going to fit him into this roster, because there is no DP slot open for Atlanta United, and unless if they decide to buy down one of their DP player, which I'm assuming it's probably going to be Marcelo Moreno, because there's been a lot of rumors that they were going to buy him down off of that DP spot. But if they're going to do that, or if they're not going to do that, I just don't see how is he going to be able to fit into this roster and not be named as a designated player, because I'm assuming anytime when you, of course, sign a player for like $10 million, he is automatically going to be a DP player in your roster. Now, the Vancouver Whitecaps have acquired Florian Ljungwirth from the San Jose Earthquakes in exchange for an unknown general allocation money. Now, this is actually still just a report, but it seems like this deal is official, that Ljungwirth is going to be going to the Vancouver Whitecaps, and I'm definitely wish Florian Ljungwirth the best, because Ljungwirth has been incredible for the Quakes in these past couple of years. Sure, yes, this year and also last year has not worked out for him, and there's no doubt that with Ljungwirth getting older now, and you can clearly see the wheels have started to kind of come off of him. He is no longer like that rock solid defender that was with this Quakes team when he first arrived in 2017 and in 2018. But there's no doubt that I still wish him for the best, and we'll see whether or not when he does go to the Whitecaps. I'm assuming most likely it's going to be just a depth signing for the Whitecaps, because surprisingly this season, the Whitecaps, in terms of the back line, it's actually pretty good. Like, it's much more stable than what we've seen in the past couple of years, where we always talk about this Whitecaps defense being kind of a mess. But this year they have been kind of rock solid, and that they're about to also get a veteran kind of MLS player that, although he isn't really going to be as good as what it was a couple of years ago, he still could be a serviceable defender where he can come off the bench and do the job that he is asked to do. Now, moving on, in terms of the last news, is that Minnesota United has reported to sign Honduran midfield Joseph Rosales. Now, I don't know exactly if this is actually going to happen, and in some way, I'm kind of surprised that the Loons are going to sign a player or sign a midfielder during this summer transfer window. By the way, this summer transfer window, the Loons have been very quiet and they haven't really been linked with anybody. But that's understandable, because they did a lot of business in the winter transfer window, bringing guys like Fragapane and Hunu into this team. And, when you make so many big signings during the winter transfer window, you expect that, or at least in this case, the primary transfer window in MLS, I was probably going to expect that the Loons were probably not going to do much in terms of the secondary transfer window. And, this seems like it's kind of the only rumor that they're going to get. And again, I just don't think the Loons really need a midfielder, because that spot is really stacked right now. Like, you have a lot of decent midfielder in this team, like Ozzy Alonso, like Will Trapp and Young Gregush, and unless maybe this could be a replacement for Ozzy Alonso, knowing the fact that I think this might be the last year for Ozzy Alonso with this, not only with this team, but really for his playing career. Maybe he is going to be a guy that's going to be taking over that spot that Ozzy Alonso is most likely not going to retain at the end of this season. And finally, getting into the last last kind of news that happened on this transfer deadline day is FC Cincinnati is reported to acquire a defender from England, and his name, of course, is Tyler Blackett from Nottingham Forest. Now, he is actually formerly a Manchester United player, but unfortunately, like many Manchester United players, never kind of break into the first team and kind of been loaned to a lot of team in the championship, and it seems like Nottingham Forest is one of the locations that he's being loaned, but it seems like now he could actually going to be coming to MLS. And for Cincinnati, knowing the fact that this has been a team that has been leaking goals, and from what I heard, he is definitely a promising kind of player, they would definitely they love to get another defender, and maybe he could be a guy to maybe slot straight into the starting 11 and maybe be solid in terms of that spot to really solidify that back line for FC Cincinnati. I mean, I think ever since when they did try to maybe sign a couple of defenders at its FC Cincinnati, and I remember when they got Jeff Cameron to this team, I thought Jeff Cameron has been doing well for this Cincinnati team. I mean, yes, he at times he did kind of make some bonehead decision, but it's still much better compared to what we saw in the beginning of the season, where that backline was just non-existent whatsoever. And not to mention, I also talked about how FC Cincinnati has actually been improving in terms of their defense, like back-to-back clean sheet that they have got in the last 2 games. And when a team that has been leaking goals a lot throughout the season, and to get back-to-back clean sheet, you can really just say that that's definitely an improvement compared to how bad this FC Cincinnati defense was in the beginning of the season. But there you have it. That is pretty much it in terms of all the news that happened on deadline day. And obviously, I try my best in terms of cover as much news as possible that happened on deadline day. I might miss some news that I didn't actually get here on the board, but this is also where I kind of say what I always do in my news of the week video, which is if there's any news here on the board that you or if there's any news that happened on deadline day and it's not on this board right now, let me know in the comments below, and I can try my best to kind of react to those news. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.